Hello, this is Greg Alton Green Greg. It's coming to you on the 22nd March 22. Time on deck is 18:10, 100 hours Central Daylight Time. I bring you tonight's special guest, Tommy Waller. And tonight he's actually Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Marine Corps retired, Tommy Waller. He's with the Center of Security Policy, and he also helps with the managing of the Secure the Grid Coalition. And that's how I met him, because he's been doing that for some time. And tonight we're going to talk about what you can do to make sure that we can secure our spent fuel rods and just the reactors at our nuclear power plants should the grid go down. This has been one of my chief concerns. I've been promoting this from way back, because this is what really worries me about the day when the grid goes down. A lot of us, we're living prepper lifestyles, grid, off grid. And many of you think that you're going to be okay. But with these nuclear power plants, especially in these nuclear fuel rods, catch fire for lack of cooling, you're not going to be okay. I'll show a little bit of that. And we'll also talk about what you can do. That's what I always like to bring solutions in my videos. Those of you who don't watch them to the end, miss that. I've got solutions in this story of what you can do. There'll be websites you can go to, things you can look at, but we have concrete action that is meaningful, where you can generate a whole bunch of letters all at once and email messages and other similar things. So please hang on, strap on for us to go through that. So my friends, before we go into that though, I'm going to say I bring you a lot of stories about this stuff. I bring a lot of videos about these things that we face in our society, along with things to do about it. So please subscribe to my channel, bang the notification bell, and click all. And also, by the way, I'll bring you specials from time to time that can really help you in a tight situation. If the grid goes down, if we lose our power, you're probably going to need long-term food storage, especially if we get into a war with Russia and might end in a nuclear winter or something like that. It might be a little while before you can grow your own stuff. So check out prepwithgreg.com. There you can get $150 off a 3-month special of this long-term storage food, which gives you 2,000 calories a day, a lot more than a lot of competitors that are sitting at 800 calories a day. 2,000 calories a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So they're going to make you a winner. $150 off 3 months. You can get $150 off of a 4-week supply. Each bucket is 2 weeks. And it's lightweight. You can definitely bury this stuff because it's sealed buckets. The sealed package is inside. Or you can take it on bug out situations in your bus, boat, car, however you want to bug out, wherever you want to go should you need to do that. It's easy to store, easy to keep, great deals. All right, with that said, I'm going to introduce Colonel Waller here. Colonel Waller, we've known each other for a while, and I'm glad to see you getting involved in this cause of keeping our power plants safe should the grid go down. Tell us about this. What got you into this saving the power plants?
Well, Greg, in a lot of ways you did. It's been part of my job at the Center for Security Policy to, my title, if you will, is a Director of Infrastructure Security. You and I both know, and my boss, of course, has reinforced this for me for years. My boss being Frank Gaffney, the founder of the Center for Security Policy. The fact that our most critical infrastructure is our electric grid, right? I'm sure your viewers are very well aware that if we lose power, we lose modern civilization. And so I'll never forget the time that I attended one of your conferences down in Alabama and had really just been assigned this duty of helping manage the Secure the Grid Coalition. And look, Greg, when I began to deep dive into this issue of the vulnerability of the grid, it caused me to begin making significant life-changing decisions for my family, right? What do you invest in? The whole while that I'm trying to promote securing the grid, I'm also preparing for it to go down. So I'll never forget the presentation that you gave down in South Alabama about the prospect of a prolonged, widespread grid outage and what that loss of offsite power could potentially do to a nuclear power plant's spent fuel and the safety systems that are there to keep that fuel cool. And so that was really my personal introduction to the subject. I will tell you, and I'm happy to go through kind of the whole story of my own personal and professional development in this area, because you were really one of the guys that inspired that. So I very much appreciate it.
Very good. Well, that means my conference had a positive effect because it launched you into doing something about it. And at the time when I brought this up, nobody was talking about it. And I was realizing we had a real issue here, and everybody was typically worried about nuclear reactors, and they have certain safeguards, but the reactors, and especially spent fuel rod pools, nobody talked about the spent fuel rod pools. And I was just showing that, hey, if you ignore the reactors, which everybody was scared of, and just look at what the spent fuel rod pools could do to you, it is horrendous. But the reactors are still part of the picture, and it's not pretty. It's just I decided to focus on what nobody was focusing on, and I opened a lot of eyes doing that. And this was back, this was back 6 years ago that I started this campaign. And a lot of people don't realize that on my channel here, that I started this myself way back then, and have been pushing this topic. And it's caught fire in our community, and a lot of people got attention on it now. So hopefully we get something done. So a lot of people think, well, I can't do anything about anything. It's what are they going to do about it? And I tell everybody, there's no they. They is us. We is they. We got to do something ourselves. But the good thing is we can. A lot of people don't realize that. You can have a lot of effectivity. You're a letter to a political person, each one is looked at as 100 communications, as a viewpoint of at least 100 people. And we start throwing enough of these in, and they start paying attention. Now, you've already put this up on the internet where people can send these responses, and you already had over 7,000 responses. So hopefully we can multiply that some. So what do you got to say to that, Tommy? What is your history? How you got in this? Talk to us a little bit.
Yeah, so just a kind of to go from 2016 when I personally was first introduced to this issue by you. Of course, I began to try to study it as much as I could. I quickly discovered to our great advantage that one of the Secure the Grid Coalition members, Tom Popick, who founded the Foundation for Resilient Societies, he too had been aware of this. And when you talk, Greg, about people taking action and making a difference, that they is us, that's a perfect example of what Tom Popick did. His Foundation for Resilient Societies actually put in a very, very detailed petition for rulemaking to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. That's the federal regulator that makes the rules for the nuclear power industry. And Greg, one of the things I want to make sure that your viewers, that they understand about me and about really most of the people I'm associated with in the Secure the Grid Coalition is we're not at all anti-nuclear power.
No,
we're very much pro-nuclear. Nuclear power can be and is an incredible, miraculous way to generate electricity. And in fact, the industry itself, the nuclear industry, is one of the safest, the American nuclear industry, one of the safest ones in the world, right? But that doesn't make up for the vulnerability that you and I both know with respect to how spent nuclear fuel must be kept cool, and the systems that are in place to keep it cool, right? Those systems predominantly relying on offsite power.
Yeah, let me add to that. The safety systems for these plants were planned should you lose a plant. What happens if you lose power to bulk power to any of these plants? And the safety systems are typically excellent. They have a lot of redundancy built into them. How the problem is when you have a nationwide or a huge wide area breakdown, especially a nationwide breakdown in a power grid, because you lose so many systems, so much of the redundancy unravels, and then you have massive problems. At some point, you cannot deal with it at a loss of that size. And that is absolutely a potential if we have a high altitude electromagnetic explosion, EMP, electromagnetic pulse, HEMP as it's called, it's high altitude. Or if you have a solar coronal mass ejection, and there's some other scenarios that could take down our bulk power system in mass across the United States. Some terrorist activities, cyber activities, several activities that might get us in this scenario wherein it gets more than we can handle, wherein the cooling water will evaporate down and we'll have massive plant after plant, spent fuel rod after spent fuel rod pool, fire, spreading nuclear radiation throughout the United States and the world. We've got to do something about this. We can do something about it. We just got to focus on, and you've taken the right steps to get this started. So tell us more, Tommy.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, Greg, what I'd like to do is I want to tell a little bit more of the story about Tom Popik's petition, and then about what's happened since then with the NRC, the U.S. Air Force's Electromagnetic Defense Task Force, and also get for your viewers a way that they can actually take action. And, I do want to mention at any point in time at securethegrid.com, the Take Action tab there's going to be a way that you can address this. We've created a decision brief that gets sent up to the right authorities to have them take action. But before we get to the rest of that story, I think what I'd like to do is just discuss, and maybe you can enlighten the viewers, what happens with that spent fuel, right? So you have fuel rods that go in the reactor. They produce massive amounts of heat that creates electricity. And once they're done, once their life has expended in the reactor, they've got to be cooled really for decades. But really for the first 5 years, the only way to keep them cool enough is in water, right? So the 20-foot rods are submerged 20 foot under. So you got about a 40-foot deep pool, and there's water circulating throughout it constantly to keep those rods cool for what? About 5 years, right?
5 to 7 years at a minimum. Unfortunately, we're keeping a lot of fuel in there longer than that just because we're having problems with proper disposal. So
right.
There's several steps that can be taken here. If you'd like, I can go through some charts here real quick.
Sure.
Screen. And
yeah, while you pull that up, I think what I'll mention, Greg, we've got 86,000 metric tons of this fuel at 75 different sites around the country. Not all of those metric tons are in water. Some are in dry casks, but we have plenty enough of it to cause a significant issue with a widespread outage. So let you, Greg, go through some of that information that really you made me aware about 6 years ago, but is still just as pertinent today.
Yeah, this is actually a 6-year-old presentation I got here. I was looking for my newer charts. I've updated this and I can't find my latest presentation. It is included in my videos, though. I did some videos on nuclear event survival, and I've got the later charts in there. I just can't figure out what I've done with them. I was looking for them. These are old charts. So yeah, this has gone way past this number 6 in. We're producing about 2,000 metric tons a year of spent fuel. And these are old charts. I think the source was actually older than that when I made this chart 6 years ago. So we have accumulated a lot of this stuff. Now what happens is these fuel rods are zirconium alloy called zircaloy coated. And that zircaloy is what burns on contact with air when it's hot. Well, those fuel pellets in them, they get hot. The rods are set in about 20 foot. They're set under 20 foot of water. Like you said, they're 40 foot deep, but they got 20 foot of water over the top of them. Well, that water evaporates away at about 160 gallons a minute. So you got to keep that stuff pumped in to keep the system cool. I'm going to show some more charts here. So my backyard is Browns Ferry. And now I say its metric tons are way above this. This plant's got a lot of waste fuel there. So if you were to go back and count, now I've redone these figures. This is an old chart, but basically there's more radioactive material in these spent fuel rod pools alone than in all the nuclear warheads on Earth. So it's worse than full-scale nuclear war if you release all that radiation, in terms of radiation, that is. So yeah, this is Browns Ferry in construction. We did have a major power outage on 27 April 2011 when a big EF5 tornado swept through. It's interesting, we're having a storm sweep through right now as we're talking. But yeah, this almost hit the building that those fuel rods are contained in. It just has a sheet metal roof on it. It's not in a containment building like the reactor. This is a spent fuel rod pool here, and it's blue because of the radiation has ionized the water in here, and it's like electrophorescent. So you have the little fuel pellets inside the rods. Those rods are zircaloy clad, and they're put in these rod containers here. And like this would be the reactor, and they will have a crane to move the rods in and out of the reactor. This is the reactor right here. And so they would move these rods and put them over here in the spent fuel rod cooling pool outside the containment building. Now in Fukushima, This building sits on top of the containment building, which is kind of weird and a little bit precarious too at the same time for that case. So yeah, there are papers that I have, I can show you where Sandia National Laboratories did studies on the flammability. There's several scientific papers of these fuel rods. I've had some people thought they weren't actually weren't flammable. Well, as you can see, they actually do burn. And in fact, they can burn slap up, especially the hotter rods, just they can totally burn up. Fortunately, these zircaloy rods did not have the uranium pellets inside them. They heated them at the same temperature the uranium would. And you can see they burned down to a pile of ash. But if it had uranium in there, the guys would be standing over them. So fortunately, they had the good sense not to have them radioactive. But what they have found that these things will burn, and that's the catastrophe situation. At Fukushima, fortunately, we've had a good fortune of the nation still had its infrastructure running after they had their problem, and they've been able to go with pumper trucks and keep water on these spent fuel rods. See, here's a line going up, pumping water right there. And so they've been able to keep the water to these places like that in that case. But here's where our reactors are in the United States. We got about 99 operating nuclear reactors, and these are where these dots are a little bit off. This one right here is a little bit off center. It's more in the center of the state, but it's approximately where you're going to find these reactors at. This is a map with a 50-mile exclusion zone around these. That's not to say you can't get some radiation traveling farther, like cesium-137 travel all over the world from Fukushima, fortunately at low levels. But if those plants had not had some kind of containment, that could have continued putting stuff out for a long time, and that amount could have accumulated. If you have multiple plants go off, you can expect higher levels of that radiation around the world, increasing over time until something is done to stop that situation. But in a nationwide, or even worse, a worldwide grid down situation, you may not be able to stop that. You may have a very severe problem. What we've got today to keep the backup fuel, keep the fuel rods cool, is these backup generators. These backup generators, though, if we have a protracted grid down, they require to be resupplied with diesel fuel. Diesel fuel has to be pumped, not only the fuel that you're putting in here, but the fuel that drives the trucks. Those trucks also require a lot of maintenance. There won't be no supply chain. There won't be much way to even buy fuel and pay the operators, because all of our financial transactions these days take place over the internet, and the bank digital money is going to cease to exist, and a lot of our means of making payments will cease to exist. We're going to have a lot of problems. The biggest problem will be just pumping fuel, getting it there. The fact that, and something else we need to factor into this, Tommy, is that we need to get the state adjutant generals involved in this. The National Guard, they need to be available to escort fuel trucks. We need to make sure we have some kind of spare parts program, because there will be hijacking of trucks as long as they are able to run, and they won't be able to run very long at all without some backup means to pump fuel, to have spare parts, because the logistics, the supply chain will shatter. And so if we plan for it, we might be able to keep those trucks running longer. But right now, there are no plans. I've talked to the adjutant generals. I've talked to the heads of state emergency management associations. I've had so many people, oh, we have plans. There's plans that are written to take care of all that. But when you talk to the heads of the EMAs and they tell you there's no such plan, you got to believe them. And I have talked to the head people in these organizations. They said, we don't have a plan for that. Well, that's something we need to push in addition to some of the steps you're talking about there. I need to talk to Tom Popick and get him on the channel too.
Yes, sir.
Some of us were talking, and this is
something. Matter of fact, Greg, real quick, if you back up just a second, back to right there. So a couple things I'd like to add to it. Just my own personal story as I began to learn about this. You know, I'm sure your viewers are interested in preparedness, right? The idea that the grid could go down causes us all to be more prudent. It's such a shame society wants to label that, like, you know, you care about EMP, so you got a tinfoil hat on, or you start to prepare yourself and then you're an apocalyptic prepper. It's such a shame that people can't just value prudence, right? So just right near where I am here, I've got a well that's got 3 different ways to get the water out of the ground, including a pitcher pump, right? A year's worth of food on site here. And this is just the home. But what I recognized was that because over time, when you work this stuff every day and you see how vulnerable it is, as much as I'm trying to do to secure the grid, I start to think, my goodness, I've got to be ready for a grid outage. And so the place initially that my family would go in a long-term protracted grid outage, unfortunately, when I look at this map right here, I'm not going to tell you where it's at, but it was right within one of these zones, specifically within about 5 miles of a very large nuclear power plant. And so I kind of thought to myself, all right, I've got to dig in to this issue. I got to learn as much as I can about it, because I might have to change the family's bug out location, right? And so, you fast forward over time, and I changed the family's bug out location specifically because of this issue. And why? Well, you mentioned the diesel generators. If you want to push forward a couple slides to that generator, that's called an emergency diesel generator, an EDG. Well, Greg, as you mentioned, those things have never been tested to see how they would respond to a nuclear electromagnetic pulse, to an intentional electromagnetic interference, or IEMI, a directed energy weapon, or a high altitude nuclear electromagnetic pulse. We don't know. It could fry those generators. The second thing you mentioned about fuel.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do these generators have computer controlled fuel injection systems?
They probably do.
If they do, then they're highly vulnerable.
And then the other thing that you mentioned, Greg, you mentioned fuel. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission's standard for the amount of fuel that they have to have on site is only 7 days. Now, yes, some nuclear plants keep much more than 7 days, but if the minimum standard is just 7 days of fuel, that's an issue as well. And so, Greg, you had a few slides before, you mentioned, the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and how, we were very blessed as a world, really, that they were able to prevent the sorts of spent fuel, fires that could have caused a catastrophe. That event took place 5 weeks after Tom Popick submitted that petition for rulemaking to the NRC on this very subject.
Very good. Okay.
And that was what, 11 years ago.
Right.
11 years ago.
11 years ago.
And the NRC, unfortunately, has not yet taken action. Now, to boil it down, look, it's about 100 pages, the petition. Phenomenal research done. He focused mostly on solar weather, the prospect of a geomagnetic disturbance taking out the entire electric grid across the United States. He didn't talk about high altitude electromagnetic pulse, didn't talk about directed energy weapons, physical attacks, mostly just GMD, geomagnetic disturbances.
Well, let's talk about that just for a second here, because NASA had estimated that we have a 14% chance per decade of getting our grid taken out by solar coronal mass ejection. We've been finding out since that there are stronger events than the Carrington event. They might be more frequent than what we had thought earlier. And as Earth's magnetosphere drops in field strength, it is possible that a weaker storm could do the same damage. So our vulnerability seems to be going up as our shields are going down. That is a real concern. I've talked about the man-made, man-instigated piece of this, but Mother Nature will get us sooner than later if we don't do something about this. This to me goes beyond grid down. Grid down is a horrific situation, but to me, this situation, the nuclear power plants as an offshoot of the grid down problem, is far worse, because I can prep, I can buy beans and other things to help me survive. It may be tough, especially if 9 out of 10 people are in the demise phase, and as they're in that demise phase, are looking to me to eat. But I got a better chance of surviving that than I do all this radiation.
Right. That's why you said it years ago, Greg. We can all prepare. We can prep as much as we want, but as a nation, this place will become uninhabitable if we don't get after this significant vulnerability. And again, it's nothing against nuclear power. Nuclear power, matter of fact, The best case scenario, and this is what Ambassador Cooper is pushing for in the Lake Wiley project up in the border of North and South Carolina, is the concept of making sure, if possible, that a nuclear power plant doesn't have to scram. It doesn't have to go offline in the event of a large grid outage. Greg, you might want to explain to the viewers what happens during a widespread grid outage if there's nowhere for that electricity to go, if there's no load to take that power production from the nuke plant. What happens? They've got to, as you mentioned with that tornado in Browns Ferry close to you, they've got to scram, right? They've got to shut the reactor down. Well, starting the reactor back up, it was called black start, is not an insignificant thing.
It takes a power plant to start a nuke plant, because a nuke plant does not take its power from itself. It takes its power from the bulk power system. A lot of people don't get this. A nuke plant cannot self-start. There is no nuke plant in America today. Maybe the little microgrid modular plants we're coming up with should be able to do that, but the large-scale nuclear plants cannot. One potential solution might be that we put a modular nuke generator at every nuclear power plant. I think that's an excellent idea, because that could help ensure that we got backup cooling and be able to restart the plant if need be. But our electrical grid is the most complex machine ever devised, and it is miraculous. Even though it's old, it's got a lot of old components, older than me even. And I've been around since Moses parted the sea, I think. But the situation is that the power grid instantaneously produces the amount of power that's instantaneously consumed. And we have three major grids in this nation that are actually composed of several subgrids with hundreds of companies involved in the production and distribution of power. All this comes together in a miraculous machine across the United States that instantaneously provides the amount of power consumed. Occasionally you get a problem, then you get brownouts, but it is an amazing machine. It's amazing what has been done with this thing, but we've got to protect it. Our lives depend on this system today. We made ourselves so reliant upon it. And our nuclear power plants are also very reliant upon it. Then, like you said, the nuclear power plants themselves are also amazing. A lot of redundancy in design, safeguards went into them. But when these things were designed, nobody imagined we would lose the entire grid in the United States.
Yeah. So, Greg, what you just mentioned when you said the word design, that's the perfect lead in to what the NRC looks at when it looks at EMP, for example. That's considered a beyond design basis threat. Just like you mentioned, they designed the nuclear power plants prior to us really understanding how EMP could affect it. So they look at it as a beyond design basis threat, which a lot of times beyond a design basis threat doesn't get addressed the way that it should. But, the US government has known about, at least with respect to the threats to the grid, right? We've known about EMP, high altitude EMP, since the 1950s and 60s. It was really proved in the Starfish Prime tests in the 60s. But with respect to the grid, there are reports, U.S. government reports, concerned about the grid as far as back as 1972 on EMP. Physical attacks on the grid. The government's been concerned about it since 1981. As far as GMD or solar weather, as far back as 1990, and cyber as far back as 2003. So here we are with more than 40 years history of U.S. government reports and concern about these vulnerabilities to the grid, and yet there's still no specific requirements to defend the grid against these four threats. Now, Greg, you mentioned about the blessings of nuclear power. We said Ambassador Cooper is working on trying to keep, in the Lake Wiley project, keep that reactor going in the prospect of a grid outage so that you don't have to black start it. Another promising thing about all this spent fuel, the 86,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel that sits right now above the earth. It's already been mined. It's already been processed. It's only slightly used. It could actually be recycled. And that fuel alone could provide 250 years worth of clean carbon-free electricity for the United States with the very reactors, Greg, that you mentioned, advanced small modular reactors initially placed at the very nuclear sites that we have now. First and foremost, able to provide power to the safety systems so we don't have a loss of power that would precipitate a spent fuel pool accident. And then secondly, able to use fuel that's been recycled that otherwise would present that hazard. You add the depleted uranium stocks that we have in the United States, that's another 750 years for the fuel. You've got a millennia worth of fuel ready to go if all we had is the political will to do the right thing, to recycle it and use small modular reactors that are all hazards hardened to use it.
Hear that, guys? A millennium. We could power our nation for 1,000 years from our waste if we're smart about it. 1,000 years. We might get fusion worked out by then, or be able to get power from space. There are concepts for space solar power to be beamed to Earth. I'm not sure that will take some work to make us feel good. We may not be there yet, but 1,000 years, in 1,000 years, we might just figure something out to keep us going beyond that. So guys, here's a real opportunity. This is something we need to jump on, and it's a way to maintain our society, to keep it safe. It don't mean that there might not be something to prep for. And by God, if you want to live off the grid, live off the grid. But you can live off the grid with some safety and assurance of the idea that you're not going to be a cooked chicken from radiation, that you're not going to be roasted while you're up in your mountain retreat, or that when you come out of your bunker because you're tired of being in a bunker, there'll be a world outside that won't be cooked from radiation, at least from the power plants. A nuclear war, most of that radiation will be gone in a couple of weeks from a nuclear war, but these power plants, they're a beautiful gift because they will just keep on giving if we don't do something to stop this. The good thing is we can. We can. Right. We absolutely can fix this, but we got to have the will. So we need to make some racket. We need to make some noise. I'm going to stop this share, and I'm going to go in and share some of these other things that like your website. I'm going to start with your security Center for Security Policy site here, just so people can see what that is, and we'll rock through a few related sites. So we have a family of organizations here that are doing our best. And guys, we're mostly volunteers. Most people are doing their effort on their own time, out of their own pocket. This Secure the Grid teleconference that Tommy and his organization put together and run every week. It usually has 20 to 25 people on the call who are all volunteers. We do this on our own time, on our own nickel. So, in fact, some of us spend money in this. If you take the conferences we did here, we lost a lot of money on that last conference, Tommy. But we're trying to save the world, and that was what motivated us to go forward. This is the Center for Security Policy.
Click on that article right there. Biden admissions coming cyber attack. I just wrote that today, Greg. So that's just one example, right? Literally yesterday, the president said a Russian cyber attack is coming. Now, this short little article chronicles the ways that we know Russia's in our grid already, okay, and the fact that we need to secure it. Now, if you stop right there, just click on my picture of my name. It's going to bring you to all the different articles that I've got. The one right there at the top in the middle, that you see the nuclear plants, okay, that decision brief, click on that. Okay, and you can find all this at a different website, securethegrid.com.
Yeah, I'm going to go there.
This is that decision brief, right? This is last week. We created this decision brief to tell the NRC to secure the spent nuclear fuel. That video is just a short clip when I was on Steve Bannon's show. And the rest of it goes through what you and I are talking about right now. The importance of us having a decision to mandate this using existing technology. We don't have to rely on emergency diesel generators and fuel resupply. There are existing technologies that could be used. Problematic. Right. And so all we have to do is decide, okay, we are going to mandate that nuclear power plants figure out how to cool the spent fuel without human intervention. and it's possible. They just have to say, do it, right? And so this decision brief provides the background and all that. Okay. Now, if you go back up towards the top, that little blue text right there, take action. Here's what's so cool about it, Greg. When you click on that, what this does, if you hit take action now, it's going to ask you for some information. Now, we have to, in this, you have to have your actual address. All right. Well, why is that? Because then that system is going to figure out exactly who your representatives are, who are your congressional leaders. Okay. And then it's going to send a tailored letter that is essentially this decision brief that goes to the president, the vice president, to the chairman and the rest of the commissioners on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and to your U.S. senators and your U.S. representatives. Now, thus far, we have had about 7,000 actions since last week. That means that
I'm not going to redo it now because I've already done this.
Right.
You fill this stuff out and you hit submit, and this is going to send this to how many people again? Who all gets this?
So president, vice president, every one of your congressional leaders, right? U.S. representatives, your two senators, the chairman, and the rest of the commissioners of the NRC. It's going to go to all those people. The other thing is, as you click through it, if you have, for example, if you have Facebook or if you have Twitter, it has a pre-tailored tweet and a pre-tailored Facebook message that will allow you to post it. And then the last menu, it literally gives you the phone numbers for all the people you could call and say, hey, this is an issue. I want you to take action on it. I think, Greg, this is what we need. We used the news peg from the war in Ukraine. If you look at the news, you see there's a lot of concern. Constantly, you see, hey, what about these different 4 nuclear power plants that are active? And then the 5th, which is Chernobyl. We saw where there was a loss of offsite power at Chernobyl for a little while.
Right.
People in the media were saying, whoa, wait a minute. Chernobyl's got a loss of offsite power. What about the spent nuclear fuel? My goodness, thank the Lord that it's so old, it would probably never boil off. But the fact is, people were talking about it. And so we were able to get in front of people and tell them about this.
It is old fuel. That's the saving grace. But we still don't absolutely know on that. And they apparently have managed to keep fuel to it or power to it. But they had some issues with it. They had some issues with, so I'm going to stop share for a second. I'm going to go back and bring that back up. I messed up there trying to rock through that.
So, Greg, one of the things I did want to mention, I just don't want to forget this because I'll never forget. In fact, I think that he said it at your conference because I believe it was the first time I heard it. Dr. Peter Pry, who I know you are very familiar with. You may have even had him on the show before. Many times. I'll never forget. And maybe he said it on your show already, but I'll never forget. He told me, he said, all of this discussion makes you think that you want to run to the frontier, right? I mean, look, I'm perfect.
By the way, Peter Pry has moved out of DC, and now he's moved even further out. He's moved again.
Good. That's good, right? So
he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Our organization is based out of Washington, D.C. I would tell you that I am not currently standing in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to tell you where I'm at, but it's outside of D.C. And so that's a good thing if Dr. Pry has moved further away. But here's the thing. What he said that stuck with me is that, the founders of this country had an infinite frontier to run to, right? And they didn't. They didn't run to the frontier. They turned and they fought tyranny. They fought tyranny and they won. And so we have to fight this tyranny of inaction. We can all have our plans and we should be prudent. We should be prepared for a blackout, but we also should fight this tyranny of inaction. And Greg, one day I want to come back. I'd love to do another event in Alabama. I'd like to come back one day and bring, every combat deployment that I ever, executed. I took with me this flag and it was folded in a rucksack that I would carry, and I told myself I would never unfold that flag unless I was in combat, right? So it's been unfolded on top of mountains of Afghanistan. It's been unfolded, on top of rubble that was Saddam Hussein's palaces in Iraq. It was flown on top of the city of Fallujah on September 11th, 2005. And in 2012 in Africa, I was south of Libya when on September 11th and September 12th, I'm sure remember an American consulate came under attack. I thought for sure that in the response that the United States of America would muster, that flag would be unfolded again. It wasn't, as you know, the history, right? But when I got this job here at working for the Center for Security Policy, and I realized this incredible vulnerability that we have here at home, it occurred to me that the fight is here. It's not over there, right? And so 25, 26 times, I think we're at 26 now, I've unfolded that flag on American soil. One of the last times was actually at Mar-a-Lago last month, you know, President Trump's house, where, you know, it's been unfolded on American soil, and we've pledged our allegiance to it with a commitment to fight for freedom, to preserve this republic here on this soil. And, you know, regardless of anybody's political beliefs, political parties, you know, when it comes to the grid, we are all in it together. We can argue about all of that all day, but if we don't have a grid and if we don't secure our nuclear fuel, we don't have a place to live.
Now, your party don't matter whether you're left or right or up or down. It's not, you're going to be under the ground. You're not careful.
That's right.
And I don't know if you're going to be breathing underground in a bunker or just pushing daisies. But
that's right.
It's not pretty. Let me share 4 sites here. I'm gonna share your Secure the Grid Coalition and a few other family sites and our family of people trying to save the universe, you might say. This is the Secure the Grid Coalition website right here. And you can see there's talk here about Chinese transformers. You may recall me having Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabey on my channel talking about this. I'll probably have him back again, not too distant future. I've had him on my channel many times. This is Mike Mabey's book here, by the way. Down here is the book. You can order it. You can come down here and you can order this book from Dr. Peter Vincent Pry. There's a lot of good information on this website, and it's clicking through. There's Mike Mabey on 60 Minutes show. Fortunately, we've helped facilitate that to happen. And this clicks through, and it's also going to show the same link that we went to a little bit ago, where we can send all your letters. But you can come here and take action.
Take action.
Take action.
Normally we keep quite a few different things up there on the Take Action post. So the first one, of course, is the spent nuclear fuel. So that's the same site you saw before. But then we just, you know, if you've got plenty of time and plenty of intensity to really get after it, you can scroll down this page and we give you more than a dozen things that you can do. And plenty of ammunition, if you want to call it that, in order to take those actions.
Hey, that looks familiar. That's one of my interviews with Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabey right there. And there you are, before you had the beard.
That's right.
So that's back in your active duty days, probably. So,
yes, sir.
All right. So, yeah, guys, we're serious. This is important. This is vital, and we can use your help. And you can make a difference. You really can. Look, I was chairman of the Policy Committee of the National Space Society for 10 years, and we ran the halls of Congress, and we changed legislation as a grassroots organization. We made things happen that would not have ordinarily happened or otherwise happened. So you'll be surprised how much effectivity you can have. A lot of people think they can't have effectivity. I beg to differ because I've seen it. Here again is the site. I already had it pulled up for this. And I'm gonna have to,
should be that first first thing to take action. Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to show a few other sites. This is Dr. Pry's organization here, the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security. And, you know, I've had several people from this group also on my channel, including yesterday, the National Director of Operations, Lynn Rhodes. I've had David Pine on here many times, and I've had Dr. Pry on here many times. This is Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabey's website, which you can also get to from probably the other 2 websites. And there he is again on his 60-minute special. So a lot of good stuff here. He has a ton of information here that you can click on and find out about a lot of things. Highly encourage that. And then there's a website that I'm paying for out of my own pocket right now for an organization called the Freedom Restoration Foundation. We have a board of people across the United States. We do action alerts, things to tell you stuff to do. This so happens the top alert right now is on the power grid. We do need to add a few new alerts, and see we put a lot of information here about things to do in our alerts. And on top of that, we've got this action center. So if you wanted to opine your own voice in many different ways, this tells you, basically, once you get below the alerts, that you can make your voice count. It shows how to track bills, both at the national government and the state government, how to contact and find your state legislators, how to find your congressional representatives. You got one congressman, you got two senators, tells you about sending an email, calling, writing, what to write, what to say on the telephone. It's some guidelines for making phone calls and things like that. And then here's the resource recaps telling you about the switchboard number in Washington, D.C. It's got a lot of information here about how to take action. And you can see some of the things that are near and dear to us here in the Freedom Restoration Foundation. And it can be much broader. So
those all look like they'd be near and dear to me too.
We might need to coordinate on this some too. We need some, I think we can have a lot of collaboration between your groups and this group here.
Right. Yeah. If you scroll, I'm just looking, scroll down, I see something about vaccine mandates and vaccine passports.
Yeah, we need to be careful with the words we use here on YouTube though. But yeah, it's all that we take on a lot of this stuff. And let me tell you something else. We have a resources page. Now we need to update this, but it's going to take a minute for it to load.
It's important work, Greg. I appreciate you doing that. You know, the only other website I would say, since we're talking about this, is resiliencesocieties.org. So that's Tom Popik's website, where you can find that original petition. Now you'll be able to find that petition in our Take Action decision brief. We're talking about the spent nuclear fuel, but resiliencesocieties.org is another good one.
Okay. Resilientsocieties.org. I'll try to add that to the show notes. Let me stop the share. Sure. Hey, we've got things like we try to list all the bills, where they're at, and who's the sponsors. This list does need updated. We need some more volunteers to help us facilitate and do these kind of things. But I don't know any website that shows so much about how to contact your congressman and what to do in that regards. And we've added some state stuff on here. We're going to add more down the road. Let me stop share for a minute. So
yeah, Greg, I'd love to coordinate with you on that, offline. What an amazing tool that you've got there. And just about everything I saw you scroll through looks like some issues that are near and dear to my heart, because of the oath that I took. I mean, look, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. There's a copy that I keep in my briefcase, just right behind this little screen. That it is a copy that was given to me by the parents of a Marine who was one of my team leaders, who was killed in Iraq, and he was their only child, and they handed that to me and they said, never forget what he died for, and I won't. And so to me, again, I only got a kind of a snapshot, just a quick glimpse of some of the things on your website. Looks to me like you're doing exactly the same thing. And that's what we all need to be doing, is preserving the freedom that came from a way of life. That Constitution that you held up, I truly believe was inspired by God.
Yeah. So let me talk for a minute so people see this, because they're going to see who's talking. Yeah. This is a document that's near and dear to me, and I've covered and talked about this in many of my previous videos. So this is important. And that oath, I've mentioned that in some of my previous videos, that we have all sworn to. If you've ever been in the military, if you've ever been a U.S. official, law enforcement, you swear that oath. And a lot of people don't really understand what it means. And a lot of what our government does goes way far outside of that, because the bureaucracy is grown too big, too far. And when you've got bureaucrats passing laws and Congress passing laws of things that are, it takes a constitutional amendment to change this. That's a very huge process. 2/3 of the states got to agree with, or you got to have a constitutional convention. And so to have Congress just willy-nilly passing laws that violate that, and the Supreme Court letting it go, there's something wrong with that picture. That's why we got to get loud and say enough of this. We got to pull it back into control.
Fight that tyranny.
Amen. Amen. You're a patriot, Tommy. I appreciate that. You're a good guy. That's why I'm proud to have known you all this time. And we got a lot to do together. I remember you and me and Command Sergeant Major Mike Maybe just sitting around and having dinner together and a brewski or twoski talking about these things. And we got to do that again, too.
I agree. Cold beer with you and the Sergeant Major, I think, is overdue, Greg. So let's make that happen, and we can do some brainstorming. And look, it's an honor for me to be on your show. I feel like it's been way too long. And again, thank you for being the guy that woke me up about spent nuclear fuel, because now I'm in a position where I can kind of do something about it. And thankfully, every single one of your viewers are in a position to do something about it. So I hope and pray they will.
That is it. Every single viewer is in a position to do something about it. Oh, by the way, I probably couldn't have but one or two of those brewskis anymore. I can't handle more than that because it makes my heart go boom, 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 boom.
I'll drink all yours. I'm a Marine.
You can do that. Well, I used to could, but I'm 8 years old now. I can't handle it. All right.
I look forward to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being the patriots that you are, and for all that you do. You go way above and beyond the call of duty with what you do with the Secure the Grid Coalition, what you do with the Center for Security Policy, and just in your personal life. I have a lot of faith and confidence in you, and I'm just, like I said, I'm proud to know you. Thank you, sir, for all you do. And I want to thank the viewers, because I know a lot of you are going to take. I'm going to thank you in advance. Now you got to pay for that. Thank you. But it don't take but a minute to do what Tommy Waller was talking about here. Just a minute. Go to that website, go in and do that, and you'll be surprised how many people you're making contact with. And if you feel like you got 5 minutes to save the universe, you might go into some of these other websites and take action on some of these other things. Read through these lists. It's worth it. We need you. We need you active. Please join us with this. So with that, I'm going to say, Tommy, thank you so much for being here. I hope to have you back again soon. And thank you for watching. Hang on for a minute. I'm going to end the video. Everybody that's been here, thank you again. And Greg out.